Welcome in, everybody. I'm Reed Cowan. Okay, so our network of video feeds from all over the country are telling the story of what is a white-hot political season. The vice president and the former president already taking swipes at each other. And our news teams are watching protests as the Israeli prime minister makes his case to Congress. This is CBS News 24/7. Let's go. Let's start you off coast to coast and streaming worldwide in Indianapolis right now. A live look as Vice President Kamala Harris is speaking right now. The likely Democratic presidential nominee is giving a keynote speech at an event for a national black sorority group. And we're going to be watching that throughout the day. Anything she has to say, you will see it right here on the stream. Now over to Capitol Hill, and a big day for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He's got a full calendar. He's meeting with House Speaker Mike Johnson right now. Netanyahu will also address Congress. That's happening in about an hour. But while he does that, you can see outside already protests. These protesters are against U.S. aid to Israel during that country's war with Hamas. Joining us now live from Capitol Hill is CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland. Scott, in about an hour from now, the Prime Minister will address Congress, hoping to shore up more support for Israel's war against Hamas.
This is a joint meeting of the Congress, which means the House and Senate are all jammed together into the House chamber. And when the Prime Minister speaks today, it's not just to the Congress. He's speaking to the nation. He's speaking to the world. There will be dozens of Democrats who intentionally skip this address, some of whom have argued to us today that they don't believe this is the right platform at the right time for the Prime Minister because there are so many concerns among Americans and among congressional Democrats about how he is administering this war in Gaza and how he's here in the United States rather than in Israel trying to finalize that hostage release agreement and a peace deal. They say he's being too focused, too myopically focused on the politics in Israel by being here in the United States. Republicans have mechanized this visit also to make a political argument, Reed. They're saying the absence of some Democrats, not just rank-and-file Democrats, some of the Democratic leaders in the Senate, the Majority Whip, Dick Durbin, the senior Democrat from Washington State, Patty Murray, and the Vice President not being here is a statement of values that they would like to campaign on between now and November. The Vice President is meeting with the Prime Minister later this week in Washington. And we add this note from Democrats. The Vice Presidential nominee of the Republicans, J.D. Vance of Ohio, is also not here for this address. He's on the campaign trail.
Well, Scott, we want to show our viewers right now live, thanking you for your report. This is Mike Johnson meeting in real time with the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. Let's listen in and see what they have to say.
Standard from the UN and the media. Today and every day, Americans must stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel in its great struggle. In this struggle, nearly 300 days after October 7th, our hearts remain with the 120 men and women, boys and girls who are still in captivity in Gaza. Adon, Iltai, Saji, Hirsch, Gadi, Judy, Omer, Keith, and so many others are being held deep in tunnels. We have not forgotten them or their families who so desperately want them home, and we, of course, do as well. Israel and the United States are united in our mission to bring them home, and I have full confidence that we will do just that. I have to say it's providential that the Prime Minister is here today after the 17th of Tammuz. It was nearly 2,000 years ago that the most powerful nation in the ancient world laid siege to Israel and destroyed Solomon's temple. But today, the most powerful nation in the modern world is standing with our Jewish friends and the Israeli government. I'm certainly eager, as we all are, to hear from the Prime Minister, and as we hope that this 17th of Tammuz marks the last time the Jewish people lament destruction so that they can live freely and securely in their ancestral homeland. I would defer to the Prime Minister for any remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker Johnson, you have shown great leadership, along with the leaders of the Senate and the minority leader in the House. I appreciate the fact that you've invited me to address this great assembly, the world's greatest democracy. The Congress of the United States speaks for the American people, and the American people speak for the entire world. I very much value this opportunity to address this august forum. You said just now something that resonates throughout the ages. Almost 2,000 years ago, the Romans breached the walls of Jerusalem on this day, almost 2,000 years ago. Well, our enemies will not breach our walls today. And our wall is not made up only of our own soldiers, our brave heroes, but also the friendship and alliance with the great United States of America. That is very much expressed here today, and I thank you for giving me this opportunity. And the people of Israel, thank you for giving us this opportunity to express our common alliance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, so there you have it. Speaker Mike Johnson right there giving a joint news conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. I want to go back to Scott McFarland. Scott, you were likely able to listen into that just a little bit and hear that, whenever a foreign leader comes to the United States, talks to lawmakers who have their hands on the purse strings, so to speak, they want something. What is in it specifically for Benjamin Netanyahu?
He needs Congress's help with foreign aid, Reed. They have provided billions of dollars of aid for humanitarian needs, for military needs, and Congress is having a real difficult time this year funding anything. So he is facing a gridlock Congress trying to prod them to continue the aid packages. Another one would come due September 30th. But also, there's a political statement here. You saw him side by side with Speaker Mike Johnson right outside the Speaker's main office on the second floor of the Capitol there. Mike Johnson's the one who extended this invite. He got the Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer to agree to support this invitation, but Mike Johnson's fingertips are all over this thing, and he is trying to galvanize political support for Republicans to continue to support Israel, to get past any opposition in their districts, and to be vocal supporters of more aid for Israel. It's going to become a heavier and heavier lift as this year goes along.
And a narrative we will hear more and more about. We know that former President Donald Trump will be meeting with Netanyahu at Mar-a-Lago with a peace through strength position on that. Scott McFarland, thank you so much. Hey, let's take a live look from the White House. President Biden is going to meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu tomorrow. But in just a few hours, the president will give his first public address since dropping out of the presidential race. Joining us live now is CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes. Nancy, Biden speechwriters, I have to say, they've got to have a pretty tall order, right? They have to codify Biden's legacy. They have to come out swinging for Kamala Harris. And at the same time, they really have to differentiate their message from Donald Trump's.
Right, and they have to beat back any suggestion by Republicans on Capitol Hill that perhaps Joe Biden should just step down from the office right now and turn the reins of the presidency over to Kamala Harris. And so the president has been hard at work on this speech. He's working with one of his longtime senior aides, Mike Donnellan. And you're right, Reed, this really is a speech that will potentially go down in history. It's been so many decades since we've seen anything remotely like this, where you have the president of the United States announcing that he is going to step aside from his bid for re-election, hand the reins over to his vice president. So he will talk about his legacy, what he's accomplished in the last 4 years here at the White House, whether it's infrastructure or climate change or prescription drugs or what have you. He'll talk about everything he thinks he's gotten done. And most importantly, he'll talk about what he still wants to get done in the 6 months he has left.
Fascinating times. We will be watching it. We want to let our viewers know at home. Again, President Biden's speech starts at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. CBS News will have a special report leading up to that starting at 7:30. Our thanks to our partners there in Washington, D.C. Live to our monitors now that are telling the story of another day of questions about the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. One day after the head of the Secret Service resigned, lawmakers are now zeroing in on FBI Director Christopher Wray. So this hearing you're seeing is still happening right now at this very moment. And one very big glaring question: how was the 20-year-old gunman able to fly that drone over the rally to scope out the area? Listen to this.
So we have recovered a drone that the shooter appears to have used. It's being exploited and analyzed by the FBI lab. The drone was recovered in his vehicle. So at the time of the shooting, the drone was in his vehicle with the controller. So in addition, it appears that around 3:50 p.m., 4 o'clock in that window on the day of the shooting, that the shooter was flying the drone around the area
2 hours
for about 11 minutes. I want to be clear, but when I say the area, not over the stage and that part of the area itself, but I would say about 200 yards, give or take, away from that. We think, but we do not know.
They will be looking at that drone footage, 200 yards, still too close for comfort, according to many lawmakers who are really drilling down there. Ray says they don't yet have a clear picture of the gunman's motive, but that his agency is investigating this as a possible act of domestic terrorism. And, you know, this all comes as former President Trump is back on the campaign trail amidst the people today, this time in North Carolina. In fact, later today, it is Donald Trump's first campaign event since President Joe Biden announced that he would not seek re-election. We'll be watching that one closely. So many candidates stepping up to so many podiums, and we are there. When we come back, we're going to take an international focus. A plane has gone down in Nepal. CBS News 24/7, streaming coast to coast, but also worldwide when we come back. We are watching Vice President Kamala Harris out on the campaign trail today ahead of President Biden's White House address tonight to the nation. Harris today speaking to a very key voter base. Let's listen in.
Our nation needs your leadership once again. In this moment, I believe we face a choice between two different visions for our nation. One focused on the future, the other focused on the past. And with your support, I am fighting for our nation's future.
Well, joining us live now from Indianapolis in the room, CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang. Okay, so Weijia, we know Trump is on the trail today, as is Kamala Harris. And we also know they are competing for those dueling dinner time headlines. How did the vice president differentiate herself today?
You know, Reed, this is actually a White House event, so it was supposed to be in her capacity as vice president that has been on the books for quite some time. But from this moment on, every single appearance is, of course, also a campaign appearance. And it comes on the heels of a brand new campaign memo from the chair of the Harris campaign that said they see support among females who are non-white and younger. Well, guess what? We are in a room right now with 6,000 members of the Zeta Phi Beta, historically black sorority, alumni and current members that were surely revved up to hear from the now likely Democratic presidential nominee. And so she spoke, as we just heard, about the future, about wanting to pave the road for future generations. And she said something, Reed, that she also said yesterday at her first official campaign rally that was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is, we are not going back. And just as it did yesterday, it drew a tremendous round of applause here today. So I wonder if that could be part of her campaign slogan, which she really is still refining, because she's only had about 3 days since Sunday, since Joe Biden dropped out of the race, to really think about fine-tuning her campaign message. But one thing is clear, Reed, that no matter who she talks to, she is going to be drawing a contrast between herself and former President Donald Trump. Remember, she is a former prosecutor, and she has said that she will take the case to Trump and continue to talk about all of their differences, including their age. Because, Reed, now Biden's age is not a campaign issue, so sources say we should expect her to really zoom in on Trump's age as him being the older candidate. In fact, he's 78 years old. She's 59. That's nearly 20 years younger. Reed?
We are also starting to see that come up in the narrative. We can hear the cheers behind you. In fact, we can see them standing and applauding. Tell us a little bit more about how many people are in that room, because we know this is not only an important voter bloc, but a very accomplished voter bloc.
Reed, it is really loud. There's a lot of excitement in this room, and I'm struggling to hear you. I believe you asked me about this very critical voter block. Is that right?
I did, my friend, yes. And how many people are there?
Yeah, there's about 6,000 people here, which is huge. And one thing that I think is important to point out is that black voters really helped propel Biden to the White House back in 2020, especially black men. And since then, we saw his numbers on the decline. And this was a voting bloc that the Biden campaign was especially worried about. And so we don't know because we don't have brand new polling. But, you know, certainly Harris has a different connection to this community. She is a graduate of Howard University, a prestigious, historically black school in Washington, D.C. And of course, she is the first woman who will likely be the Democratic nominee for president. And so she brings to these voters a different perspective, a different way of connecting, and how that will translate at the polls is to be determined. But I can tell you that I have spoken to lots of voters on the campaign trail, and many of them told me that they've never participated in rallies before. They've never participated in donating to a campaign, and they are for the first time ever. And I think it's that organic support, too, that the campaign's really trying to hone in on. And the numbers are showing it's working. I mean, she has raised a historic amount of money since launching her campaign, way more than $100 million since Sunday. So I think they're just hoping that this energy, this excitement can translate into something, Reed, in November.
Weijia Jiang reporting live from Indianapolis. We thank you once again for streaming with us today. Hey, let's take our video feeds right now to Nepal. 18 people killed when a small plane crashed and caught fire. Look at this. This is the aftermath. The plane went down shortly after taking off, and we are learning that some sort of fire on board is thought to be the reason why that plane crashed down on the runway. But we also got this video. Look at this. This is surveillance video. Follow that dot. It shows the plane flying at a sharp angle and then crashing and then bursting into more flames there in the distance. The plane on its way to a very popular tourist destination in the area. Everybody killed, but shockingly, the pilot survived. We also have an update on last week's global tech outage that grounded flights and disrupted businesses and even hospitals. So here's what we've been able to find out. CrowdStrike, the cybersecurity company at the center of the crash, they blame a bug in their test software. The company says they're working on a series of measures and fixes and updates to prevent this from ever happening again. That will be music to the ears of many people who got that blue screen. Well, it's official. Congratulations to Salt Lake City, Utah. They will host the 2034 Olympic Winter Games. That's courtesy of the International Olympic Committee in Paris today, causing a lot of people in that mountain state to wake up early to hear the announcement that the games have been awarded to Salt Lake once again. Keep in mind, Salt Lake City hosted the first Winter Games there in Utah in 2002, just after the 9/11 terror attacks. The games will cost Salt Lake City billions, as they do every host city, but leaders there say they plan to reuse all of the Olympic venues built and used in 2002, and they have been using them for training for the many years since then. Let's jump the map now to Oregon. A wildfire putting people on the run there as firefighters beat back flames and tell people to evacuate and get out fast. This fire that you're looking at here on the screen is now at more than 700 acres. There is a little bit of ray of hope to highlight here. Cooler weather overnight really helped firefighters make the progress in getting the fire out in Oregon. But we do have more fire to talk about, and this time in the state of California, excessive heat causing the Madera County fire to grow into a monster. It's a tough one to kill. This isn't far from Fresno, by the way. 50 acres burned, only 30% contained. But as you see right there, the sheriff there in Madera County telling people to be very careful and limiting traffic up into that heavy brush area that could go up at any second. They're fighting it from the sky. You see they're dropping the water and the fire retardant on the flames, and they're hoping in Madera County they can get some relief. The good news is, for people who live in this remote area, Evacuation orders and warnings have now been lifted. However, parts of California are still under a heat warning. Heat does no help for fighting a fire, Jess.
By no means, and we're in that season right now where we see the impacts of this dry weather in full force, especially after such a wet winter that we had. Now, as we head into the next couple days, look at all these advisories on the map that the National Weather Service has issued. The pink is that heat advisory that we've been talking about. The gray right over there, it's air quality alerts that are still in effect right now over in Oregon due to these mega fires. And to add to that, we are keeping a very close eye on the temperatures too, because daytime highs today, they're sitting well above average for this time of year. Over into Montana, Idaho, and stretching over into Wyoming, daytime highs today are breaking records all throughout those states. We're expected to hit 105 today in Billings, Pocatello, Idaho, sitting at 100 degrees this afternoon. So not only are we dealing with fires, not only are we dealing with poor air quality, but hot temperatures to match that as well. And to add to that, I want to dive into what's happening in the forecast right around the corner. The severe weather outlook looking into the next couple of days is showing a marginal risk for a potential chance of dry lightning into the afternoon hours tonight, early morning hours tomorrow. And we can see that on Futurecast, actually. The storm is tracking from the west to the east. We see light chances of showers, but the big concern right now is dry lightning that will last as we head into the forecasted hours tonight and early tomorrow morning. We'll have more on that coming up in a bit, as well as what's going on over in Texas. Reed?
Wow, the heat and the dry lightning, just perfect storm for a tragedy. We hope that does not happen, but thanks for keeping us updated. Okay, when we come back, we're not going to talk about fires. We're going to talk about floods. They're hitting Georgia and Texas pretty hard. CBS News 24/7, right after the break. Our video feeds bringing us this look at the impacts of a typhoon hitting Japan. Look at that. Driving winds, heavy winds, and a lot of rain behind it. 10 inches expected to hit Okinawa in just a short amount of time. What does that mean? Threat of mudslides, threat of flooding, and a lot of people expected to be impacted. That's why Japanese authorities have warned thousands to stay home, to stay inside, hunker down until that typhoon passes. That typhoon is a troublemaker for Taiwan as well. It is expected to be the strongest storm to hit that island in 8 years. In fact, we can tell you workplaces and schools just suspended. Everybody told to stay home. A lot of international and nearly all domestic flights canceled in that area. And that means you see the travelers there, they're stuck for the time being. But I want to jump the map to a waterlogged Atlanta. This new video right here we're going to show you is going to let you really see in real time what it's like to wake up there. People are trapped in their homes because of rising waters. We're also seeing a lot of downed trees in that area, washed out roads. In fact, at least 5 homes damaged and 19 people displaced right now. There's another problem, and it's a theme we've heard for weeks in various states. Electricity is out to thousands in a place called DeKalb County. So Texas is also under flash flood warnings. In fact, look at this video. It is coming into our feeds from the central part of Texas. As you can see there, the roadways are very, very wet. In some places, the lower parts of the roads, they're impassable right now. And that means it's downright dangerous. Flooding, making it so first responders cannot get in. And we want to talk about the floods that are hitting this part of the country with Jess.
All right, let's dive straight into what the National Weather Service is saying about this region right now. As we take a look at our map below me, Texas is dealing with flood watches and warnings all throughout that coastline, close to Corpus Christi, Houston, all the way over into Dallas. We've been seeing some heavy active storms really build, and we're going to continue to watch more storms develop in that whole region. And you can see those clouds in real time just all over the state of Texas, Louisiana, heading over into Mississippi. Take a look right behind me real fast. I want to show you what's happening as we head into the next 24 hours. This storm is active. It's bringing in heavy rain to these communities, and the ground is already saturated. That's the issue right now in regions like Louisiana and Texas. Just along this coastline, Corpus Christi, stretching all the way over to Houston, could receive anywhere from around 2 to 6 inches of rain throughout the forecasted models right behind me, heading into our Thursday forecast into the afternoon hours. So take a look at these numbers and take a look at your local communities too. If you live in these regions, we could see anywhere up to around 6 inches of rain near Galveston heading heading into the early morning hours tomorrow, late afternoon hours too. Houston, a similar trend, just around 3 inches at max expected. We're continuing to watch the storm develop. Right now, the Atlantic is relatively calm when it comes to hurricane activity, but that doesn't mean that these frontal systems still don't last. We'll have more on that coming up in just a bit, Reed, but it has been a very active setup down in Texas.
That's why we're glad you are here to warn our viewers coast to coast. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Okay, so right now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is making the rounds in Washington, D.C. And while he does, there are protesters outside many doors, not only in the United States, but also in Israel. Coming up, we'll talk to Natalie Brand, one of our CBS correspondents, about what she's seeing from the protesters' perspective. Welcome back, everybody. We are looking live at Capitol Hill right now, where we are awaiting Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressing members of Congress. We're about a half hour away from that happening. Before that, the Prime Minister met with Senate leaders Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell, and he also met with House Speaker Mike Johnson. Here's some of what they had to say.
Our enemies will not breach our walls today, and our wall is not made up only of our own soldiers, our brave heroes, but also the friendship and alliance with the great United States of America. That is very much expressed here today, and I thank you for giving me this opportunity. And the people of Israel, thank you for giving us this opportunity to express our common alliance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So a handshake there, but outside, anything but handshakes. Israel's war in Gaza, a flashpoint for protesters. They came out in force today against U.S. aid to Israel. Protesters want an end to the war. They want a release to hostages.
My main message is that you can all be both pro-Israeli and protest Netanyahu in any way you can. The most important thing is to stand with the people of Israel, pressure Netanyahu to seal the deal and end the war and bring them home.
Seal the deal, end the war, bring them home. Joining us live now from Washington, D.C., just a couple of blocks away from where Benjamin Netanyahu will talk to members of Congress, CBS's Natalie Brand. Tell us what the protesters are having to say there in that crowd.
Hi, Reed. We're about a block away from the U.S. Capitol complex, and this is a look at the demonstration, the pro-Palestinian demonstration, which includes thousands, as you can see here. We're told they came from really all over the Northeast to be here to make their message heard ahead of Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech. They are calling for an end to the war, an end to all U.S. aid for Israel, and they are right now on the move. They had a series of speakers here, and now they are marching, we believe, toward the Capitol. What you cannot see right now, because we are right in the middle of where they are marching, but around each side there are heavy police presence, hundreds of police officers keeping things here calm and peaceful. That is the hope. Not only bicycle officers, extra security barricades, but also 200 additional officers brought in from the NYPD, sworn in yesterday to help with Capitol security ahead of this speech. Now, this is one demonstration happening, but on the other side of the Capitol, there's also a pro-Israel, anti-Netanyahu demonstration. You actually heard from a demonstrator I spoke to earlier today. His message is that he believes the Prime Minister is not focusing enough on closing a deal to end the fighting and bring the hostages home. He believes that Netanyahu is here speaking to his political base and instead should be focusing on the ongoing negotiations. So, bottom line, there are multiple demonstrations happening at the same time ahead of this major speech. And I have to say, we've noticed some tension between the various groups. So that's why all the extra officers are out here, not only keeping the Capitol complex secure, but also trying to tamp down tensions, keep all of these demonstrations peaceful and calm. Reed.
Natalie Brand, a compelling report there as in our communities, our nation continues to talk about Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza. Hey, and by the way, protesters also making their voices heard in Israel. CBS News foreign correspondent Deborah Pata is live in Tel Aviv. Set the scene where you are and what you expect to happen over the next hour.
Well, Reed, I'm here in Hostage Square in Tel Aviv, which has become something of a symbolic meeting point for the families of hostages and protesters since the war began 9 months ago. Almost a monument, if you like, to those who were taken into captivity. Protesters are trickling in. It's still quite laid back here. It's not that full because the protesters are about 15 minutes away. In about 15 minutes, they will converge on Hostage Square. You can see the big screens behind me. Those screens will beam Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech live to this group. Now, this is a very angry group of protesters and a very seasoned group of protesters. They've been protesting literally since the war began over 9 months ago, and their voices are getting louder and louder and more angry. They are fed up that Netanyahu has gone to Washington. They say it's a waste of time. He should have stayed home and secured a hostage deal, and they are furious that he has failed to do that so far. Reed.
Deborah Pata, live in Tel Aviv, we thank you. All right, so let's go back to Washington and a little bit of what you just heard Natalie Brown talk about. The families of those Israeli hostages meeting with lawmakers, and they want a pledge by our elected representatives to speak with one voice for that ceasefire and a hostage deal. In fact, listen to Maya Roman. She's a family member to 2 women who were captured and held by Hamas.
So many hostage families came here to D.C. to make sure that everyone remembers what we are here for, to save lives. The Hostage Family Forum back home urged Netanyahu not to come here and give this speech now, at a time when a deal is so close. Because by coming here, he risks making himself the issue, turning the humanitarian issue of the hostages into a political one, and shifting the conversation. We are here to ask you not to let him. I am asking you to focus on the people on the ground, our families and the Palestinian people suffering in Gaza. We know that a deal is very close. It actually pains me to say this because we've been in this situation many times before, feeling hopeful so many times. I have been forcing myself not to get my hopes up, but I have to let myself believe so I can communicate to you the urgency of the situation.
So for hundreds of nights, she's gone to bed knowing that 2 of her family members are still being held somewhere in Gaza by Hamas, and wanting to send the clear message that the focus should be on her relatives and other relatives and the people who are caught in the midst of this conflict and not Benjamin Netanyahu. Also taking a live look at the White House, President Biden is getting ready to meet with the Prime Minister. That happens tomorrow. But today, President Joe Biden is busy to deliver on his promise to address the nation about his choice to bow out of the presidential race and instead endorse Vice President Kamala Harris in the race to the White House. President Biden's speech starts at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, and CBS News on all of our various platforms will lead that coverage. That starts at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Let's jump the map to the other side of the country, to California now, where crews are working to fully contain what is the largest fire burning in that state right now. You're looking at the aftermath there and the fire in forward progress. Flames breaking out earlier this month in Santa Barbara County. It exploded in size. That fire has now burned more than 38,000 acres. Go closer, you'll see what we're talking about. While firefighters sleep in tents and work in shifts right there, they are heroic. They have been able to get this monster fire about 90% contained.
Still a fire burning out there, and even when it's contained 100%, there's still going to be a fire out there.
That fire he's talking about has destroyed 4 structures so far and injured 7 people. Well, our video feed's also taking us north to Canada. And look at this. Same theme. Dry underbrush and fire sparking. This wildfire burning in Jasper National Park, forcing thousands of people to have to evacuate. By the way, the town of Jasper, if you don't know it, and that park are closed as crews work to get that blaze under control. It just, Jessica, punctuates this time of year. We are in summertime, and if you see a firefighter, thank a firefighter.
That is so true. Thank you guys so much for your service for our country, too. And here's what's going on. Not only that national park, but Glacier National Park is dealing with some really hot weather, too. Actually, record-breaking numbers. And as we take a quick look at what's happening, here's all the advisories on this map issued by the National Weather Service. The pink and the orange, those are heat advisories and warnings widespread throughout the Pacific Northwest, stretching throughout the state of California as the firefighters are out there right now continuing to work on those mega fires, not only in the state of California, but Oregon, too. See that gray over in Oregon? That's air quality advisories, and we're keeping a close eye on the air quality all throughout the Bay Area, or excuse me, all throughout the Pacific Northwest as we head into the coming days, because as we continue to watch those fires burn, that's impacting many communities. To add to that, daytime highs are breaking records throughout that region. Billings today sitting at 105 degrees. That's a record-breaking number there, and we see record-breaking numbers throughout dozens of cities all throughout the north. Take a look right behind me. I want to show you what's going on. Areas like Idaho, Oregon, all the way up into Montana as we head into the coming days. The big concern is dry lightning that could potentially cause more wildfires throughout that region. It's a marginal risk right now on our severe weather outlook issued by the Storm Prediction Center, but taking a look at Futurecast, here's what it's looking like throughout the next 24 hours. Those light storms continue to track all the way off into the east, and that's what we're keeping a close eye on as meteorologists, as those storms wipe throughout those regions with dry conditions. That's a big concern. We'll have more on Texas and what's going on down there in just a bit. For now, over to you, Reed.
All right, well, Vice President Kamala Harris is out on the campaign trail once again today. She is doing that ahead of President Joe Biden's White House address to the nation tonight. Harris speaking to a very key voter bloc in Indianapolis and going after Donald Trump's plans for a second term. Listen to this.
So I say, as we work to build a brighter future and to move our nation forward, we must also recognize there are those who are trying to take us backward. You may have seen their agenda. Part of it is called Project 2025. Now, can you believe they put that in writing? 900 pages of it. Project 2025, a plan to return America to a dark past. They intend to cut Medicare, to repeal our $35 cap on insulin, to eliminate the Department of Education, to end programs like Head Start, which would take away preschool for hundreds of thousands of children in our communities. Let's be clear. This represents an outright attack on our children, our families, and our future. These extremists want to take us back, but we are not going back. We are not going back.
An emerging campaign slogan from Vice President Kamala Harris on the campaign trail trying to get the keys to the White House. We are not going back. We are going to go back and have a conversation, though, about that assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. You know, we talked about how Kimberly Cheadle resigned her position from head of the Secret Service, but now FBI Director Christopher Wray, it's his turn to be in the hot seat. He's talking about that attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump and all of the things that led up to it. Lawmakers say there are several unanswered questions about the failures that led to the rally events. And here's a big one, including the recovery of 3 explosive devices belonging to the 20-year-old gunman. Here's what Wray had to say to lawmakers today.
I would say these are relatively, again, keyword relatively crude devices themselves, but they did have the ability to be detonated remotely. And so to that point, in addition to the 2 devices that we recovered out of his vehicle, there were receivers for those 2 explosive devices with the devices. And then on the shooter himself, when he was killed by law enforcement, he had a transmitter with him. Now, I do want to add one important point here, is at the moment, it looks to us, again, ongoing review, and I can't say that too many times. At a moment, it looks like because of the on-off position on the receivers, that if he had tried to detonate those devices from the roof, it would not have worked. But that doesn't mean the explosives weren't dangerous.
So, Christopher Wray, more forthcoming than, of course, the now former head of the Secret Service was. Wray also said the gunman flew a drone near the site of the rally about 2 hours before he opened fire. That is something that shocked lawmakers when he made that revelation. Meantime, Donald Trump is going to hold a rally in North Carolina later today. He is out amidst the people and protected by the Secret Service while he does that. It's Donald Trump's first campaign event since President Joe Biden announced that he would not seek re-election. So Donald Trump is now likely to face the woman you see here on the screen, our nation's Vice President, Kamala Harris, in the race to the White House. His campaign office says Trump is prepared to take on Harris in the November election, and they are ready. Now, we've been talking about news about Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his movements in Washington, D.C. It started the day at a memorial service for the late Senator Joe Lieberman. A little bit more about that when we come back. On Capitol Hill right now, where we await Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to address Congress. We're about 10 minutes away from that happening. CBS News 24/7 will bring that to you live. You know, earlier this morning, Netanyahu joined former Vice President Al Gore at a memorial service for former Senator Joe Lieberman. Both powerhouse leaders spoke about their friend. Here's a listen to that.
He was an exemplary leader who combined clear and forceful convictions with a pragmatic approach to solving problems and to solving conflict. He was an American patriot and a proud Jew who steadfastly stood with Israel and the Jewish people, especially during trying times.
I knew Joe long before I had the honor of asking him to run alongside me in the election for president and vice president 24 years ago. I knew him when he was Attorney General of Connecticut. And then, of course, we became colleagues and allies and very, very close friends in the Senate.
Al Gore speaking there. It bears noting that Benjamin Netanyahu and Al Gore shared the stage for a man who started something and was a part of something called No Labels, which tried to bring people together. We take a look now at new video out of the Philippines where Typhoon Gaimi and southwest monsoon brought floodwaters to the streets of the Philippine capital. Look at that. They are literally floating on wood in some parts. You can see a lot of people having to wade through waters, in some cases waist high, making those makeshift floats to get across, some of them trying to rescue their motorbikes that they need to be able to get about their business in drier times. Schools and most government offices, we understand, are suspended as that storm blows through that region. It's home to 13 million now waterlogged people. It looks like community spirit is working there. They're helping each other. That typhoon, by the way, is now on its way to Taiwan. And also, America will not be hit by that, but we do know flooding is a problem in the United States, Jess.
Specifically over in Texas. So let's head over there real fast, where right now the National Weather Service has issued flood watches and warnings all throughout our coastline close to Houston and Corpus Christi. We have been dealing with some really active storms, those clouds still sitting all over that state, as well as Louisiana and Mississippi, too. Take a look right behind me. Here's what's happening as we head into the next 24 hours. We're continuing to watch these storms really build just in that region. Right behind me, you're going to be able to see futurecasts showing heavy storms bringing anywhere from around 2 to 6 inches of rain all throughout that region in the evening hours tonight, early morning hours tomorrow, as that really starts to billow its way close to Louisiana. Here's the numbers on the map. Close to around 6 inches expected near Galveston. We're expecting close to around 3 inches in the city of Houston. I'll have more on that coming up. For now, over to you, Reed.
All right, our video feed taking us now to Nepal. 18 people killed when a small plane crashed and then caught fire. Look at the aftermath there. The plane went down shortly after taking off. We are learning a fire on board is likely what caused that plane to crash near a runway. And then look at this video. Follow the dot, the highlighted dot there. This is surveillance video that shows the plane flying at a sharp and rather erratic angle. It then crashed and burst into more flames there. You can see that off in the distance. The plane apparently was on its way to a very popular tourist destination. Everybody died, but shockingly, the pilot is the lone survivor. We also have an update on last week's global tech outage. The grounded flights and disrupted businesses and even hospitals caused a lot of people to have some headaches. CrowdStrike, that's the cybersecurity company at the center of the crash, blames a bug in its test software. So if you're flying, maybe check your itineraries. That's it for CBS News 24/7. We leave you with a look at Congress, where Benjamin Netanyahu is about to have his words to our nation's leaders.